Taoiseach, when you have time, I know the Minister is taking phone calls from the Bundestag, obviously looking for their opinions on his announcement, but I would like your own attention, Taoiseach.
Sorry, could we have order for each speaker, please? Deputy Durkin, order, please.
Taoiseach, last February, a huge majority of the electorate voted for change. They voted for an end to the failed policies of Fianna Fáil, and they voted for an end to the politics of the Green Party. They voted for a new approach to the economy, to unemployment, to the banks, to the public services and to political reform. And they voted for an end to political cronyism. The people wanted change. Taoiseach, they wanted fairness and they wanted equality. And most of all, they wanted hope that tomorrow would be better than yesterday. In the 9 months that Fine Gael and Labour have been in office, you have broken promise after promise. You have slowly but steadily dashed the hopes of those people who put their faith in you. Across the state, despite the litany of broken promises, people were still holding out for good news. They were still yearning for hope that your budget announcements this week would make tomorrow better than yesterday. And Taoiseach, I have no desire to come here today and criticise, but having listened to your colleague and your colleague Minister Brendan Howland yesterday and Minister Noonan's speech today, I'm left with no other option. People want solutions. They don't want shouting from the sidelines. They want a plan. And a few short weeks ago, my party submitted to the Department of Finance a costed pre-budget submission. It was a document that was full of choices, a document that set out the route to recovery. You took some of our advice, you backed down on some of the cuts, and you went after the public health budget subsidising private healthcare. But you didn't go far enough. I believe history will judge this government badly. I believe that you have made all the wrong choices, and never has a government promised so much and delivered so little. After this budget, Taoiseach, you can't stand up in this chamber and claim that it's all Fianna Fáil's fault. You can't wring your hands and say that you had no option, that you had to do this. This is your budget. These are all of your choices. Yes, Fianna Fáil caused the mess, but today you have added to it. Tadini na hí sa bhála, ach takeíart a bhar goit páirtithe, agus tá siad a géisteart leis an cén aisne seo, agus déisteart leis an méid a bhí le ré ag an Ára Howland inné. Agus tá siad a cur na ceiste a Taoiseach, tá siad a greic cudéan differ a rinne an téhan a mína fiabhra. Is cinnte go danig airtha ar na páirtí a tanis sa rialtas, ach níor tháinig airtha ar bí ar policy na rialtas. Nuair a bhain na 100,000 duine chuig na bothan bátaile, ní bhain go raibh siad geirí deireadh thar le ré Fianna Fáil san rialtas, bhí siad geirí deireadh thar le na policy lochta a bhí Fianna Fáil a chur a bhaim. Ach go dtéach bhfuil siad aniu, agus go dtéach bhfuil siad ané, bhfuil siad sibse, páirtí ina Gael agus páirtí an lochta bre a chur a bhaim go heile agus go hiomlán na policy lochta sin a bhaim. People are watching this budget speech today, and they're numbed by the effect of it, as they add up the total loss of income from your stealth charges and from your spending cuts. They have had 2 days of bad news now. Cuts and taxes mounted on top of each other, with no regard as to how they're supposed to pay for any of this. Ordinary families, they've been crying out for fairness. Indeed, Minister, and indeed, Taoiseach, you have told us time and time again that if anything, this budget would be fair. In your state broadcast on Sunday night, Taoiseach, you told us that we didn't cause the crisis, but today you're making every single one of us pay for the crisis. Is this the kind of fairness that you had in mind? A fairness that gives Anglo-Irish Bank €3.1 billion of taxpayers' money every year, while 500,000 people are crying out for investment in jobs. A fairness that allows yourself, Taoiseach, to earn €200,000, or the Taoiseach €184,000, or the Minister for Finance €169,000, while ordinary working families are struggling to make ends meet. Of course, Taoiseach, you aren't going after the high earners in this budget. Last year, the Minister for Finance was in receipt of a ministerial pension on top of his Dáil salary. Taoiseach, you know that, because you were in receipt of a ministerial pension last year when you were on this side of the House, still as a TD. So you talk about this now and you'll change everything, but you've practised it on this side only 12 months ago. If Sinn Féin have not put these payments on the agenda, sitting TDs would still be in receipt of them. You didn't go after the high earners in this budget, Taoiseach, because yous are the high earners. Times are tough, but they're not tough for this government or their political cronies. So Taoiseach, tell me this, riddle me this, what happened to those that caused the crisis? What happened to those that caused the crisis? What's the budget saying to them? The bankers, the developers, the politicians who were there at the time of the crash. Where's the fairness in the budget for them? Well, we know that 22 of the top Anglo-Irish executives that were there at the time of the collapse, 22 of the top 50 are still in their position. 19 are earning over €175,000, paid by the public purse. We know that former Taoiseach Bertie Ahern and Brian Cowan are on pensions after your reduction of €147,000 per year. And while you're increasing taxes on ordinary working families, ministers and junior ministers and office holders are still able to claim an unvouched tax write-down of up to €3,500 to have their laundry done when they stay in Dublin hotels. That's the type of fairness that you want to introduce in this budget. And Minister and Taoiseach, this is your idea of fairness, then it is a very skewed idea of fairness indeed. So what was fair? What was fair about the cuts yesterday, Taoiseach? They were the most vicious in nature. You went after the children, the disabled, lone parents, widows and carers. They were your 5 target groups. You spun the line about protecting social welfare payments, about not cutting the basic unemployment rate. All the while, this government was cutting extra child benefit rate, multiple birth grants, abolishing disability benefit for the under-18s and slashing it almost in half for young people. He's attacked lone parents on multiple fronts, going after widow and widowers' pensions, cutting the back to education allowance, slashing the fuel allowance and going after carers. And Taoiseach, that's just one small element of what you did in one department. And you deceived the Irish people in your cut savings. You claim, for example, that social welfare cuts were €475 million, but that's just for 2012. In a full year, the social welfare cuts are €811 million. The education cuts are €316 million, and the health cuts are €837 million. Now, you notice that the Minister is nodding his head, but actually your book says that the full year effect of the health cuts are €797 million. So at least I know now what to buy you for Christmas, Taoiseach and the Minister for Finance, because you can't do the sums. These are 40 million out on your sums in this book and the book that was presented yesterday. And we're demanding that 40 million back. We'll give you the calculator at Christmas, or maybe you are just continuing with the Kevin Cardiff School of Economics. 3.6 billion here, 40 billion in health there. Sure, what the hell, it doesn't make a difference. And Taoiseach, these were the frontline services. These were the frontline services. Over these 3 areas, €1.9 billion in cuts that you were supposed to protect. Tá party is the anseo ag réagúil to the wewer na Gaeltachta agus na Gaeilge. At ní leor bríochra brethe agus cant gan gríomh. Tá sé ríthailear inis go bhfuil sibh ar siúl, sin rud ar siúl agah na Corrigéil agus Bréige. Tá géirí siar de deifan géad déanta ar bhuidead na Gaeltachta. A ara, tan Gaeltacht faoi insaí. Tá Offican Commissioner Channel le dúnúgah, tá sé bheith níl sé bheith tuairt cap dá chéhanna bheith againn fáinne bordúdras na Gaeltachta uairthéil, agus tá ísle céime tugad an údras. Ní go leor muoinú chur ar fáil, chun pasta chrúthú agus a phríomhnú sa Gaeltachta, agus tá an strateis fiche bliana caite ar leithú agah, agus bína implachtaí seo, marafa seo, a lig ar muntir na Gaeltachta agus tauchaí na Gaeilge sa tír seo go Thomlan. A ara, níl seo mai go leor. The biggest cut yesterday, Taoiseach, was in people's expectations, because there's no hope offered in this budget to the growing numbers of working poor, or to the struggling middle-income families, or to the most vulnerable in society. There's no vision for business, no economic thinking that adds up, and that's not what people signed up for. That's not what people voted for when they voted for change. Today, people already struggling are being told that they will have to pay more stealth taxes, household charge, higher VAT, motor taxes, fuel, excise cost. Rural dwellers have been discriminated against. They're told that they will have to pay septic tank charges, and we know that water charges and property taxes are on the way for all. Minister Noonan announced €1 billion in new taxes today, and there was some applause for going after wealth. And I'm glad some of the measures were introduced, and I'll deal with that in more specific detail. But let's deal with the four main stealth charges. Motor tax, full year effect 46 million, household charge 160 million, VAT 670 million, carbon tax 109 million. It adds up to 985 million. They're the measures. That's where you're getting your €1 billion in new taxes. Stealth taxes that affect the most vulnerable in the most indiscriminate way. But people are also being told that none of these taxes will go towards public services. Health, education, welfare will all suffer under this government. You're increasing taxes, Taoiseach, to continue the failed banking policy of Fianna Fáil. Yesterday, we heard you cut €2.2 billion from the public spending. Next year, our debt servicing costs will increase by €2.6 billion. So be honest, Taoiseach, with the people. Tell them where their money is going. You should also be honest and explain that all your cuts in taxes will not work. The exchequer deficit remains large because instead of directing our resources into creating jobs and growing the economy, what you have done is nearly spent it all in bailing out the banks, and you are continuing along that failed path. And let's be clear about this here, because you can't blame it all on Fianna Fáil. Since Fine Gael and Labour took office in March this year, your government has pumped a staggering €20.7 billion of our money into the banks, including €3.1 billion into Anglo-Irish Bank, a payment that you will pay again on the 31st of March next year, and again the year after, and again the year after, up into the year 2025. The reckless economic policies by Fianna Fáil during the boom created the economic crisis. The years of austerity and bank bailouts that they followed deepened the crisis. Now the continuation of those same policies by Fine Gael and Labour will only serve to make matters worse. Across the country, people have watched the Minister's speech today, and they're growing increasingly despondent. They're feeling angry, they're feeling hurt, and they're feeling badly let down. And I want to appeal directly to every single one of them. The people out there who really want change, who voted for change last February, to every one of you who feel that we deserve better. I want everyone to know who's contemplating immigration, or who's at their lowest, or who feels that there's no light at the end of the tunnel, that real change is still possible. That there are people in this state who believe in a better, fairer Ireland, and who have a vision for that, and with their help can make this a better country. There are better choices, despite the fact that Fine Gael and Labour decided not to take them in this budget, and Sinn Féin has championed that alternative. Sinn Féin has argued that the priority in this budget should have been investment in jobs. We argued against spending cuts and pointed out that the tax system needed to be overhauled and the wealthy had to pay their fair share. Minister, Taoiseach, no wealthy person ever died from having to pay more taxes. But the cuts you inflicted on the health services and the social welfare payments yesterday will mean the difference between life and death. 5,000 people die prematurely every year in this state because of inequalities in areas such as health. Up to 2,000 people die each winter due to the cold. So how many more, Taoiseach, will die of fuel poverty or inadequate access to healthcare following your cuts? And as if the cuts weren't bad enough, today you heap more pain on people. Your stealth tax, the VAT rise, the carbon tax, the household charge. Minister, Taoiseach, undoubtedly Ireland needs to stabilise our finances. We need to return to the bond markets as soon as possible, and Sinn Féin is of the opinion the sooner the better that we get out of this mess so that we can get back our sovereignty. But where we differ with this government, and where we differed with the last government, is of the best and fastest way to do that. And I am firmly of the view that continuing the failed banking policy of Fianna Fáil will not help our chances of recovery. And I am joined in this view by economists of the left, of the centre and of the right. Indeed, you know, it's very hard to find somebody, bar Fine Gael and Labour and Fianna Fáil and the ECB and the banks themselves, who think it's justifiable to put €3.1 billion into Anglo-Irish Bank, or to continue to pay out unguaranteed bondholders in full. But that's what you're doing. This government has already fully recapitalised the banks, while the rest of Europe wait to see if the EFSF or the ECB will pick up the tab for them. Bailing out banks and bondholders while asking the sick, the elderly and the children to pick up the tab is shameful, Taoiseach. But leaving aside the banking crisis, we have a structural deficit that must be reduced. In our pre-budget submission, we set out a package of measures which would close the deficit, starting with a €3.5 billion in new measures in 2012. This would bring the deficit to 8.3% of GDP when implemented alongside our €7 billion stimulus package. And we propose to fund that stimulus package from the remaining of the National Pension Reserve Fund and partial investment from the European Investment Bank. This would create 60,000 jobs minimum and would potentially save up to another 100,000 jobs. Our approach to economic recovery is far more comprehensive than the government's deficit-focused strategy. The government believes that it can cut its way out of this mess, that it can cut its way out of the recession. But Taoiseach, this has already been tried by Fianna Fáil, and it completely and utterly failed. €20.6 billion of unfair taxes and cuts later, have you not learned the lesson yet? If cuts and flat taxes worked, then the deficit would be closed by now. The fact that this budget is predicated on a set of growth figures for next year, which have already been reviewed downward by observers, means that the budgetary adjustment won't have its desired effect. And I am sure that Minister Noonan is blushing at the fact that only days ago, after huge anticipation about what the growth rates would be for 2012, that today he's come into the chamber just days later and downgraded the growth rates by 0.3%. Absolutely unbelievable. Or he's just making this up as you go along. Our measures are fair. Our measures are fair. They're non-deflationary and they're most likely to work. The domestic economy is on its knees. People's spending power has been demolished, and today you've added to the mess by cutting it more. Less people, less money in people's pockets means less money in the tills. Less money in the tills means less jobs. It's a vicious circle, it's a vicious cycle, Taoiseach. And that is why we propose measures such as a wealth tax, such as a third rate of tax on income above €100,000. That is why we proposed abolishing the universal social charge. The government has set itself a set of numerical targets which cannot be reached because you don't take into account the effects that your bad policy will have on economic activity. And I want to deal in specifics with some of these bad policy measures. And Taoiseach, I don't know if I'm the only person in this state to remember what the 5-point plan was all about. Taoiseach, do you remember your 5-point plan? I'll remind you. Point one, Taoiseach. Point one. A €7 billion stimulus package to create 100,000 jobs. And the Labour Party had a similar plan. Today, there are 444,000 people on the live register. 9,500 people more than when you took office. And we cannot count all of the people who've emigrated or the people who aren't entitled to social welfare assistance, because, such as the self-employed, because you have provided no safety net for them. Taoiseach, you seem to think that immigration is the safety valve for unemployment. 54,000 people, Taoiseach. 54. I know it's hard to take, but listen, Taoiseach, and you may learn something. 54,000 people have emigrated since you took office. I want to tell you what immigration really is, Taoiseach. Immigration is empty chairs around the Christmas table this Christmas. Immigration is grandparents who will never see their grandchildren. Immigration is families and communities devastated. Taoiseach, have you walked into any of our third-level campuses recently? Have you? Well, have you found a student who believes that immigration is not in their future? Because you will be hard-pressed to find a student who doesn't believe that immigration is in their future. So, Taoiseach, how do you tell the parents of those children why you're driving them out of the state, why you have prioritised private bank bondholders over the future of Irish school children? Test look at say Taoiseach, na jockey could towards on the Dini Shaw, Rash could and Cheer Shaw, a Krihe. Na me and Jishanaku, Tadi news na state into America. Tishat san Australia, agus Chira Ella Harlar, agus ni Chucky should the Rash could and Cheer Shaw could jaw. Ní seo scéal uair híisi, Harlas a ribbe. Honnig muid an rud céarna, Harlas na cuigadís na seascatí, agus honnig muid a rís na aquatí. Bhí ma ehar hain, agus ma wehar hain, bhí acu an tíir seo aigal agus imar go albain, an then tú rugu me hain agus ma hud derhar agus derafra. Ach bhín tehharne híise, bhín deisio gonne hart na wala go dí ar tíir in é fihe bliana haar lear. Ach ní rún deis céarna I go leor daoine eile, agus bhí go leor daoine náirí go maiile nar a déag siad an tíir seo. Dabar siad go ddíhala, thar siad an náirigad na wala hog agus tealaí, agus chodí siad le de tealaí agus chodí siad le na tíir. Ach chanig amman na cruaie, háil siad a post, háil siad an láisting, agus bhí siad acu cónaí ar na sreidne. Agus tá siad le fice go fáil a tíisi, agus teiste go seo, tá siad ar fod sasans na bailte móra lig. Agus is mór an né a tíise duite, gur dógur se bené, 1.3 million euro a once in the daine seo a dex na cheers na cuiaitis na seascatí agus ar an Vancouver in London in you. Mór an né a díb. You talk a good talk, Taoiseach, on jobs, but strip away all the rhetoric. Spare it, take it right down to the bone, and there's nothing there. So you might have got away with this in the first few days or the first few weeks of government, but now it's wearing thin, Taoiseach. Yesterday you cut the capital budget by 750 million. You cut Enterprise Ireland's budget and you went after the disposable income. Today you raise VAT, fuel prices. Taoiseach, you're actively trying to cut jobs.
Deputy, could you put your mouse to the chair, please?
The 2% hike in VAT, the 2% hike in VAT will see more businesses put under strain from diminishing consumer spending.
No.
And more of them will go to the wall. The vicious cycle that was began by Fianna Fáil and the Greens of relying on indirect taxation is being continued under the watch of this government. Not only will this measure be tough for businesses and jobs, it will disproportionately affect lower income earners who pay more of their income on VAT. The 670 million you say this figure will bring in is less than what Sinn Féin has proposed to bring in a wealth tax. We propose to bring in 800 million. You talk about tough choices. This government talks about tough choices, but it's not tough to go after a spending tax. Tough is going after wealth. Tough is going after the vested interest. Tough is going after the status quo. In France, they have the luxury of the wealthy individuals appealing to the government to tax them more just to be patriotic. In Ireland, we have the wealthiest in society standing behind this government, saying to the government, tax them more, the most vulnerable in society, and the government acquiesce. Well, Taoiseach, you cannot squeeze any more blood from this stone. It is dry. The VAT rate announced today is a mistake. The Minister for Finance knows it because it is the argument that he made in opposition. This isn't to mention the impact that VAT will have on already struggling border towns, including my own home county of Donegal. Increasing VAT in the hope that will generate enough cash to reduce our deficit is absolutely nonsense. By its nature, it will have a diminishing effect on returns as people spend less. And we see that already. VAT has collapsed this year. So what you're doing is attempting to run just to stand still. And I've listened to Fianna Fáil talk about the unjustifiable nature of increasing VAT. But let's be clear. The only difference between Fianna Fáil's VAT plans and this government's VAT plans are 12 months. Fianna Fáil saw VAT as an easy option too. They also drove hard-pressed retailers in border counties to the wall. They pushed up the cost of living for ordinary people, and they're no more interested in saving jobs than you in this government are, Taoiseach.
Please.
This government's attacks on education will do little to help the knowledge economy. The state cannot come out of this crisis without the tools to do so. These include a well-trained, well-educated workforce. By making education the preserve of the elite, an opportunity for those who can only afford it, you are not ensuring a workforce for the future. This is what you have done with your cuts to the capitation grant, cuts to funding for higher education bodies, increasing the fees by €250. Thank you, Minister. I'm sure the students are delighted with you. And also abolishing maintenance grants for postgrads. What you are doing is pulling down the shutters on the futures of thousands of young men and women not lucky enough to be born into a wealthy family. In this day and age, in a first world country, I don't know how any of you can stand over this. This government has been bleating on for months about its decision to keep tax rates and bands the same. This is a mantra that is meant to distract people, while the government is holding them upside down and shaking the spare coins out of their pockets with their VAT increases, their household charge, their water charges and other stealth tax. Keeping rates and bands the same means keeping them the same for everyone. So that means that those in €20,000 are treated the same as those in €200,000. That's nothing to be proud of. What we have proposed is an abolition of the universal social charge, to be replaced with an income levy and with a lower rate reduced to 1% and reintroducing the health levy. And what that would mean is everyone earning under €70,000 would be better off under Sinn Féin's direct taxation proposals. You have failed to do that today. It would also mean 500,000 people taken out of the tax net. You have claimed today that people will come out of this budget with the same take-home pay. But what you don't say is that when they get home with their pay packets, that you're going to fleece them with higher bills, higher charges, higher stealth taxes and a range of other measures aimed to reduce their disposable income. The Minister has announced today a tinkering with the universal social charge, and I do want to welcome this fact that he has ensured that those that earn less than €193 per week are now exempt from the universal social charge. But do you not think it's fair, or do you think it's fair, that people earning €193 or €94 per week are still paying this unjust charge? There were 514,000 more people brought into the tax net as a result of the universal social charge. The measures announced today will leave 184 of them still in the tax net. These people are paying a regressive charge that is not only damaging their quality of life, but economic activity in terms of consumption. To have lifted everyone out of the universal social charge earning under €15,000 would have cost €120 million. Taking everyone out from under the minimum wage would have cost €170 million. What we would have done in Sinn Féin would have been abolish it, but even these measures would have been fairer than what you have done today. We look at tax in a different way. We go after wealth, we go after tax breaks, we go after loopholes. Reducing the pension ceiling and capping and standardising pension reliefs would bring in €550 million alone. Having mortgage interest relief for landlords would bring in €400 million. The changes that we proposed to capital acquisition tax and capital gains tax would bring in €360 million. And this is the strategy that increases revenue without damaging the wider economy. Flat rate taxes are regressive. The Labour Party seems to have mixed all of this up, the definitions of regressive and progressive taxes, since his election manifesto. So I'll simplify it for them. Regressive taxes means unfair, and they're not as productive. If you look it up in the dictionary, you'll find it beside property taxes. And Minister, nowhere is your political choice to go after the socially and economically vulnerable more stark than in your decision to levy a flat rate tax, a regressive tax on households. A household charge is a stealth tax. The way you have levied it will hit those struggling the hardest. Regardless of income, regardless of property size, everyone's going to pay €100. A family with 3 kids, a mortgage of €1,000 a month, mounting energy and food bills, they'll pay €100. But the wealthy individual living in a valuable home, no mortgage, will pay €100 too. So, Taoiseach, maybe you can tell me how this measure is fair. Some of your government TDs, I'm sure, will say, but sure, it's only €100. And you'll say that because you have simply no idea what €100 means for a family that's already on the breadline. Add that €100 to the increased bills, to the increase in travel costs, to the cuts in their income that he's announced yesterday, and you'll see what it will start to mean and how it adds up. And it's only €100 this year, but we know from the programme, the Memorandum of Understanding that Fianna Fáil negotiated, that it's to increase year on year. Minister, what is more distressing is that you're levying this charge at people, many of whom are in mortgage distress. These people took out huge mortgages. They paid massive stamp duties, and in some cases they took out their mortgages at high interest rates just to own a home. And you've done little or nothing for the 100,000 households in mortgage distress, and today you tell them that you expect to pay this government a €100 household charge on top of their bills. It is not right and it is not fair. Minister, you have lined up stealth taxes in this budget, and I wonder if you've given any thought to the effects of these taxes. Take your motor tax, for example. I know in my own home county of Donegal, and it's the same right across rural Ireland and the west of Ireland. People are dependent on their cars for transport. We don't have trains in Donegal. We don't have public transport networks as other regions may be able to participate of. People need their cars to get to work. They need their cars to drop their kids to school, to take care of their relatives, to go to the shops. They need their cars to get from A to B. And that's all to do with the legacy of bad transport planning by previous governments. It's about ignoring the west of Ireland. And what you have done today is you've increased motor tax. Fuel is going to go up, and we know that there's a proposal to examine VRT and more motor tax increases when the report comes back next year. So somebody in a mid-range car is going to expect a €46 increase in their motor tax. And people are absolutely mad about this here. I know in my own home county what people are going to be saying is, you expect us to pay €46 more on the roads that we're travelling? They pay €46 more nearly every second week having to fix their shocks and their sumps because of the potholes in the road that will not be fixed because you have cut €750 million out of the capital budget. The changes to capital acquisition tax and capital gains tax do not go far enough. Yesterday, your government attacked child benefit to save $70 million in a full year. And when I heard about these cuts, I was reminded last year of Joan Burton, who stood up there. And she told this House, when Fianna Fáil cut the child benefit, that it was a reflection on how few women were in government and how little power women had. Well, Joan and government could have gone to her cabinet colleagues and explained that an increase in capital gains tax to 40% would have raised $195 million, while reducing all the capital acquisition tax thresholds by 25% while increasing the rate to 35% would have raised $165 million. And you have even allowed today capital gains tax exemptions today. These measures, if she was able to convince you of them, would have saved Joan the cut to child benefit and would have saved those families. And she could then have rightly declared that she had wielded as a woman considerable political power. Taoiseach, you have failed to deal with the legacy of Fianna Fáil property reliefs, the reliefs that drove the bubble today. You have extended capital gains holiday for people who choose once again to speculate in the property market. You have cut stamp duty for non-residential property from 6% to 2% from midnight tonight. Compare your attitude to property to your attitude yesterday to young, severely disabled people who you told that you valued them half as much today than you did yesterday. You're the same as the Fianna Fáil ministers that you condemned last year. You will protect the high earners who you fear will become insolvent, but you'll go after the most vulnerable and tell them that you have no choice. You're trying to create speculation in the property market yet again. But you will not deal with upward-only rent reviews which are destroying businesses and killing jobs. And remember, not dealing with upward-only rent reviews means that this state will pay €10 million in rents. This state rents properties that are locked in to upward-only rent reviews, totalling €58 million. So the failure to implement this decision, and you, Taoiseach, this morning, as late as this morning, told us this was under review. Did the Minister not give you a copy of his script before you got up on the order of business? And I'll let you talk about jobs. I got a message yesterday from a fellow in my own constituency, and he says, I'm closing up. Jobs are going to be lost because of upward-only rent reviews. And you'll probably say, well, there's nothing we can do about that there. Do you know who's applying the upward-only rent review, Taoiseach? The Department of Agriculture. That is who's putting him and others out of jobs. Because this state, regardless of any legal advice, this state has people and businesses tied into upward-only rent reviews, and I have a full list of them in my office, and I'll pass them on to you if you want. That is something you can deal with straight here and now. Taoiseach, there are 100,000 families in serious mortgage distress. And where is the fairness in them in this budget? Almost 70 families are falling into serious mortgage distress every single day. While repossession rates have been low by comparison to other countries, that will not last forever. 1,048 families have lost their homes in the last 2 years. This is 1,048 repossessions too many. And without government action, this number will increase. The Fine Gael and Labour programme for government included clear promises on mortgage distress. You promised to direct mortgage providers in receipt of state support to cut their costs. Yet today, mortgages are more costly than when you took office. You promised to make greater use of mortgage interest supplement to support families who cannot meet their mortgage payments. Yet Minister Howland announced yesterday a cut of 22.5 million to this benefit and increased personal contributions for struggling homeowners by up to €572 per year. So despite all the promises you made during the election and in the programme for government, you're now taking the same minimalist approach that was taken by Fianna Fáil. And across the state, thousands of families are facing sleepless nights. They're wondering how they're going to pay next month's mortgage bill. And they're being faced at this point in time with choosing into mortgage distress or mortgage arrears or to buy their presents for their children. They will have watched your budget speech, Minister, searching for something that would give them hope, and they will be bitterly disappointed. They will be asking themselves a simple question, very simple question. If you could find €20.7 billion for the banks since taking office, why couldn't you find anything for them? If it's so easy and comprehensively to bail out the banks, why couldn't you provide any support for these families at risk of losing their homes? As you did following the publication of the Keane report in October, you have left struggling family homeowners to the mercy of the banks. You have saddled tens of thousands of homeowners with decades of unsustainable debt. You could have chosen a different course. Minister, you could have chosen to maintaining the family home a priority. You could have sought appropriate alternatives to ensuring debt sustainability, and you could have found a way to ensure that the burden of mortgage distress is shared fairly between the borrowers and the lenders. Minister Noonan's proposal to increase mortgage interest relief to 30% for first-time buyers who purchased their homes between 2004 and 2008 demonstrates that he simply doesn't understand the magnitude of this problem. This is the wrong approach. It will assist some, but will leave many others in continued distress. It is arbitrary, it is discriminatory, and it is not enough. What about the family who bought their home before 2004? What about the family who needed to upgrade because of an increase in family size? What about the family who had to relocate because they were searching for work? Does the measure assist any of these struggling mortgage holders? No, it doesn't. Before I conclude, Taoiseach, I want to just point out that I'm very conscious of the fact that you're producing this budget and we're debating it here today against a backdrop of an intensifying European crisis, that it could have far-reaching implications for the future of Ireland and the Eurozone. My party leader and I have asked this government on numerous occasions whether there is a contingency plan in place for dealing with any eventualities arising from the euro crisis. We know other governments, including the French and the Germans, have been developing such plans, and even investment firms here in this city are developing such plans and have passed these plans on to their customers. Yet each time we raise this issue in the House, you tell us that you have every confidence in your European partners and their abilities to stabilise the crisis. Well, Taoiseach, nobody believes you. Not the public, not the markets, not this House. And I'm urging you again today to bring the opposition parties into government buildings and to discuss in confidence if needs be this issue. You urgently need to reassure the public that you are taking this crisis seriously and preparing for all scenarios. The events unfolding in Europe are frightening people. Agreements are being reached between powerful EU member states, and Ireland isn't even represented at the table. Last week, Taoiseach, you said clearly that you were against treaty change. This morning, the Taoiseach Eamon Gilmore said that the government was open to negotiation on treaty change. So, Taoiseach, where does the government stand on this issue? Do you support enshrining austerity and recession-inducing budgetary policy into EU law? Do you support giving the European Court of Justice say in policing member states' budgets? Do you support the transfer of fiscal powers from this House to EU institutions? Do you support the ruling out of any private sector involvement in burden sharing and dealing with the currency crisis? I ask you these questions, Taoiseach, because these are the key elements that Sarkozy and Merkel will bring to you at the Crisis Summit on Friday. These are the demands that they're going to make of you, Taoiseach. But more importantly, Taoiseach, these are the proposals that will consign this state and its people to a decade of crippling austerity. If agreed to this weekend, they will have a negative consequence for employment, for debt and for reducing the deficit. In short, Taoiseach, they will undermine everything that you claim your government is trying to achieve this week in this disastrous budget. Taoiseach, what is the government's bottom line in the Crisis Summit this weekend? Do you even have a bottom line? What price are you willing to accept in exchange for wearing the economic straitjacket that has been proposed by Sarkozy and Merkel? Will you return from the summit like Alpha Reynolds did in '92 with a bag full of euro gold, hoping that the electorate will be bedazzled into accepting treaty changes with long-term and damaging consequences for Ireland and indeed the Eurozone? Or will this government agree to changes in the hope to avoid a referendum, using technical legal arguments to avoid giving the people their say? Taoiseach, 90 years ago, one of your predecessors signed a treaty that had far-reaching and negative consequences for the Irish people. So let us hope, Taoiseach, that you don't come back from Ireland to Ireland after this weekend, after this summit, having made the same mistake. Taoiseach, you have been softening, and your government colleagues have been softening up the Irish people for months. You've been telling us that you had to deliver this budget, that you had no other choices but these choices. You have raised the spectre of the Troika and the Memorandum of Understanding, which you said you would renegotiate on every occasion to defend your own economic agenda.
Very briefly.
I believe that there were choices to be made this week, and my party's pre-budget submission set them out. It chose not to go after ordinary families. It chose to invest in growth and jobs. It chose to cut the high earners in the public sector and tax those who can afford it. You claim that you could not have done any of these. That is simply not true. My party has met the Troika. They have told us that they will accept the choices as long as the main items, as the main budgetary targets are met. And so all of these choices are damaging for the economy. All of them will be damaging for people and families. And I'll conclude on this here. Last night, Taoiseach, a homeless man was found dead in Dublin. They suspect he died from hypothermia. I wonder, does that move you, Taoiseach? That you're a member of government that allows people to die in the streets of cold. Every year, and this is true, hand on heart, every year after the budget, since I've been elected to the Shannon of the Dáil, I leave this chamber after the budget speech, and I walk out Kildare Street entrance, and there's 2 points that every TD and senator will know where homeless people sleep within. When you're standing on the plinth, you can see where they sleep. And I walk past them, and I wonder, will this budget have changed their life in any way? And the answer is always no. The answer is always no. In this budget, Taoiseach, you're exposed. Your government exposed. The Irish people sat in judgment of Fianna Fáil, and I promise you they will sit in judgment of Fine Gael and Labour the same way. You're my good.